Do you think that this is sort of the first step or opening salvo of governments attempting to ban self-custody? Like they want to be able to, kind of capture Bitcoin to be able to control it more?
So if I look at what happened in Venezuela, right, and I kind of give you, because the reason I keep going back to that is I think I equate the fiat system as a set of dominoes, and there's the reserve dominoes that sit at the reserve end of the curve, US, Canada, Europe, which have never even shaken. You're starting to see them shake for the first time now. But then there's like the dominoes that are further on the end of the curve, which have fallen many times over, like ours. Venezuela has removed, and this is not a joke, 13 zeros from its currency while I've been alive.
That's incredible.
That's while I've been alive only. Okay, so I had a pinned tweet on my account that I removed it after a while, but it said, "Bad money never dies; it just resets." So I've seen a money like the Bolivar has had a million reasons to die, but yet it hasn't. All right, and it doesn't because they have the monopoly on violence at the end of the day that just forces everybody to continue using it. Right. Um, as money as citizens and constituents start opting out of their money because they understand and start losing faith in their government, inflation starts rising, and the government starts trying to push back against it, right?
Yeah.
And so they do that in different ways. They do that by trying to restrict the amount of properties you can buy, or the amount of dollars you can buy, or the amount of hard assets that you can purchase, right? And so they start trying to restrict you in that way. Um, I um, I don't, will governments continue down this trend? I think that's inevitable. Like governments all over the world will continue to just try to, you know, guide try to get their agenda through. And, there might be people that stand in the way and then start trying to opt out of their currency. And they're going to try to contain that in some ways. They're going to try to contain that by either limiting the price of dollars, fixing the price of dollars, like in China. I don't know if anybody listening has ever tried to buy or sell a US dollar in China, but it's very difficult, right? And there are countries that put these little barriers and boundaries so they can contain their exchange rate. I think this is a trend that will likely continue as this sort of tug of war between fiats continues to happen, continues to unfold.
Yeah.
But I think it's a game of ebbing and flowing, right? Because the second you start tightening too much, there's very little friction right now to move your assets all over the world, especially with Bitcoin, right? So the second you start tightening things too much, you'll start seeing some of these people say, okay, well, perhaps this is not the best place for my assets. Perhaps I'll take them here. And so what I think Bitcoin will do is it will eliminate the friction to move assets around the world into different jurisdictions. And eventually the end game of that is that you get governments then having to start competing to host you.
Right.
And so I think what that does is that it kind of flips it, because the way the governments have kind of set their foot is by saying, no, we're not going to allow the movement of capital. We're going to basically put these boundaries here for you to bring it out and take it in, because that's how we contain our exchange rate, right?
Right.
But as Bitcoin eliminates the ability for governments to contain that flow of capital, it flips the game into now them saying, okay, the first governments that start understanding how this game has switched will benefit ultimately. And I think we're seeing some of that in El Salvador, right?
Yeah.
Like El Salvador is turning around and saying, wait a second, some guys here are trying to ban it. China did a horrible, I think, terrible policy decision and banned everything a few months ago.
That big blunder, I think, will turn out to be.
Then, no, it's not, because they're trying to prevent Chinese people from taking money out of the country. That's
okay. Well, yeah, not a blunder for their purposes.
Correct. But it tells me at least that Bitcoin's doing its job. And so then you have what happened in Russia, right? Russia banned it 4 weeks ago. Within the same week, Putin came out saying, no, do not ban it. Like that is not a good idea. Again, to me, that says Bitcoin's doing its job, right? So going back to your first question about, is Bitcoin keeping its promise? Like, at the world stage, I think yes, absolutely, no question in my mind. There are some isolated events. No, I don't say isolated events. There are some events that hit some people closer to home than others, right? And so naturally, North Americans are kind of saying, okay, look at what's happening in Canada. That could be me. They look like me. I have friends there. I can relate to that, right? And you feel it. You feel it, right? Similarly, I bet you that there are people in Ukraine right now that probably hadn't even thought about Bitcoin until what happened this morning. and they're going to wake up and say, wow, like they don't really think about what happened in Ottawa. They look at what happened to them and how Bitcoin helps that context.
Right.
And so again, at the world stage, these eye-opening events on why we need Bitcoin continue to happen around us. There's just some that hit closer to home than others.